Welcome to the Releasing Community podcast. This is where we share our love for the Sedona Method and releasing. We share our gains, insights, and experiences. Today, before we go to our today's guest, let me say that I am Katja Törmänen, and me and Stephen Carlson Roberts. Am I saying it wrong now?
Stephen Robert Carlson is quite okay.
Stephen Robert Carlson will be hosting this podcast. Sorry about that, Stephen. And today our guest is Yvonne Spence. Yvonne started using the Sedona Method in 2008, and she first took the Facilitator Training in 2016. She's a writer and a coach, and she loves to support people finding freedom where they used to be stuck with difficult emotions and thinking. She particularly loves to help people break free from the prison of self-criticism, shame, and guilt, and to notice and find the love that is in every living being. Warm welcome, Yvonne. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, lovely to be here.
And tell us, let's start. How did you find the Sedona Method?
Well, the way I found the Sedona Method was I used to read this blog called The Urban Monk, which was written by a young man in Australia. And I don't think it exists anymore. I'm pretty sure it's gone. He was doing a psychology degree and he was really interested in all sorts of different modalities, but he would look at the more conventional stuff and then also at the more spiritual or unusual or alternative things. And I would comment on his blog quite often because I found quite a lot of what he was writing about really interesting. And he kept telling me that the Sedona Method was really good and I wanted to try it. And I just was really not that interested at first because I sort of thought, well, I already have so many other things that I'm doing that really work. And I can't even remember what finally convinced me. I think it was possibly a thing that he wrote. No, I don't think it was. I can't remember. But for some reason, I decided to just give it a go. And I saw the book in a bookshop and I just thought, oh, well, I'll just buy it and read it. So I did. So that was my introduction. That was how I got to know about it.
And this was 2016, is that right?
No, that was 2008. In fact, it was probably even earlier than that he first mentioned it, but it was a long time ago.
Mm.
Yeah. So you started with the book, and then how long did you spend with the book, or how quickly did you find courses? Or
it was quite a while. I was reading the book, and I was working at that point, actually as a volunteer counsellor at a helpline for parents, which I found really stressful. And you never knew what you were going to get because these parents could phone up and say, my son or daughter is an absolute nightmare. I hate them and they're doing everything wrong and it's all their fault, which I found really difficult to deal with. And then other ones would ring up and say, I'm a terrible parent, I'm awful. And then I'd be able to support them. I found them easier than the ones that were busy blaming their children for everything. So anyway, I would get really nervous before I was walking to work. I would walk. It was, I don't know how far, but it was a bit. And I would walk there and I'd be feeling really nervous and worrying about what was going to come. And I would remember what I'd been reading in the book. And I'd sort of think, okay, can I let myself feel this fear? And I don't know why, because it's not something that I consistently do. But for some reason at that time, I imagined my fear like a ball of barbed wire. Do you know what barbed wire is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I imagined it as a barbed wire and bits of it would be flying off. So my fear was getting smaller. And I think somehow that helped just to be visualizing it as being smaller. So I didn't think I had to just get rid of it because I think I had a lot of anxiety and fear throughout my life. And people would quite often tell me that I should just not be like that. So I had a lot of resistance to just letting it all go. And being able to just visualize bits of it going off, I think made it easier. And very quickly, I also found that the welcoming was what I really, really, really found worked so well, because I suppose because I had so much of the time felt that my emotions were wrong and I shouldn't have them. And so to be able to just welcome these emotions probably was, I don't know. I mean, I'm just making this up now as I'm thinking about it, but that was probably why I found the welcoming so good.
Oh, that is. Lots of people have shared that welcoming is the thing that kind of made the shift.
Well, it's just so kind. And also, I can remember thinking that even if I can't welcome how I'm feeling, I can welcome that I can't welcome how I'm feeling. So it almost felt like you could keep stepping back until there was something that you could welcome.
Ah, that's brilliant. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
But also there's this undercurrent of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really all about self-acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this resistance. Oh, I can't feel that. I'm not supposed to. Oh, I'm not like that kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a permission to feel whatever is being felt. And then the next step, of course, is understanding that, well, no, it's not me at all. In fact, it's just, something that passes through awareness, something that I experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to think about it now because it's so long ago, but I think at that time I probably did think that my emotions were me, or at least if they weren't me, that they made up who I was or something like that, if that makes sense. I can remember coaching someone a few years ago that just really couldn't believe that she wasn't her emotions, but they make me who I am. She was saying that they're, and it kind of, at the time I thought, yeah, I think I did used to feel like that, but it's it's so long ago that it's, you just are so used to realizing, oh yeah, that's not who I am.
Yeah, it's also something that's shared come often, that people tend to forget who they were or how they felt before.
Yeah.
It's because it becomes so normal certain things become so normal.
Yeah. I would say so, definitely.
So when did you find your way to the community, to the courses and retreats?
I can't remember exactly, but it would probably have been 2009, something like that. Certainly the first of the courses that I bought, which was the 4-in-1 one, was in 2009, about the time that my father was diagnosed with cancer. And there was other things going on in my family as well that were quite stressful. And I had been using it just as best I could, just having read the book, and sort of thought, this definitely helps and I want to use it more. And there was a situation in particular where I was feeling quite stressed with another person and feeling like I needed to know what to say, and suddenly I realized, no, all I need to do is actually feel what I'm feeling. I don't need to try and get them to change. I can just let myself feel this fear that I'm feeling. So I just welcome the fear and just let it be there and let it go, just as we were talking. And that helped me to deal with it and to recognize that I didn't need to try and change the other person. So that was when I really, I suppose, saw, yeah, this is something I want to know a lot more about, and it's also something that has I don't know what the word would be, a power is what's coming to my mind, a power to actually really support me in a way that I need. As I suppose what I thought at the time, I'm not entirely sure, but something like that. But I do very clearly remember that time when it was just sort of, I don't know what to do or say here. What am I going to say? Thinking that I needed to get the other person to see things differently, and then just saying, no, I don't. I just need to let myself be with my own feelings. I'd been learning non-violent communication at the time, which was very much about trying to talk to people in a way where you express your needs and what you want and things like that. And I found it really difficult because that in a heated situation, I was having to try and think about what could their needs be? How am I going to respond to that? What would I say that would reflect their needs and all this kind of thing? And it was just getting me so much in my head, where I was noticing, oh, I'm feeling this feeling of fear. Can I welcome that? Can I just let that be here and I let it go? Oh, yeah. And then I found that I naturally was more able to do what I'd been learning in the non-violent communication. I was more naturally able to empathise with the other person and to feel calmer and to respond to it. So I just thought, yeah, this is more of benefit to me because it wasn't getting me in my head, it was taking me out of my head.
That is one of the, yeah, I totally agree. I haven't done the nonviolent communication, but the thing of not getting into your head, because I found I had studied lots of different modalities, and they had lots of kind of comments and guidelines how to work, how to behave and act in a certain situation. But that was exactly my experience. Like, I was like, what was I supposed to be doing now? I don't remember. And I froze, and it just kept me thinking. And and the less you think, the better you are allowing the situation to be.
Yeah. And I kind of feel now, as I look back on it, not necessarily that there was anything wrong with nonviolent communication, and it does have a lot of benefits. And I think the thing that really I found beneficial from that was recognizing that when people were acting in a way that wasn't optimal, it was that there was an unmet need there somewhere. It wasn't that they were a bad person. So I found that useful. So I'm not saying there was nothing useful about it. There definitely was. But the way that I had been taught it, at least, because it was exactly what you're talking about. I have to try and remember what to say. I have to try and remember to get this right. It's coming from the same kind of thinking that's causing our problems in the first place. It's coming from that sense of there's something that I'm not doing right, and I need to try and figure out what it is and do it differently. Whereas when you're coming from the feeling of, oh, I'm feeling a feeling here, and it's okay to feel this feeling, and it's okay to be how I am in this moment, then that just calms you down in the first place. So it just is easier to then respond naturally.
Yeah, definitely. Fully agree with that.
That's a good way of describing it, really. And the other thing is, it's the difference between the mind, as you described, the mind is attempting always to optimize the world in some way, make things better for you, but it does it in a way which is actually very, requires a lot of energy and leads to a lot of paralysis. It tends to need to go over things again and again, doesn't it? Particularly at 3 a.m., when you can't sleep. versus the intuitive nudge, you could say it that way. Sometimes it's the still small voice, the sense that of intuitive flow, the power that knows the way, is how we sometimes, or Hale sometimes expresses that. But it's so much easier to go through life without overthinking, because in some way action arises in the appropriate way in each moment. You can only really act from the current moment.
And I think it's also that there's so many approaches that basically are about trying to fix you, trying to fix the situation, trying to fix. And that in itself generates a lot of stress, because that we're trying to fix, and there's the underlying assumption that something is wrong. Whereas when you come to it from a more holistic kind of approach, it's more that everything is actually okay. We're okay as we are. And yes, we may have misunderstandings or confusions, or we may be misunderstanding things, but that's all it is. It's not that there's anything wrong. And that for me is what I think the Sedona Method is really pointing to, that we are already what we're looking for. We're already whole. We're already complete. It's just we keep looking away, and so we don't see that.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing Hale. Hale has been talking about that you're already whole, complete, and enough as you are since the day one, since I started listening to him. And it's just amazing how little you get from something before you're ready for it. Because I think it took me years to really kind of first time to actually hear it. So I said, yeah, this is the thing he says here. And the mind skipped over it or tried to distract me with something. And then the first day, like, no, wow, I really got that. Like, actually, right now, without any change. It was like the clouds had opened and the sun came in. But I think some wise person has said that the simplest things, Elsa says that something like that too, like it's so simple, if it was complicated, everyone would get it. So we make it complicated, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times. I think Lester apparently said it, but I've heard it from other teachers as well.
Yes, yeah. So you started doing the courses then, and I think I've seen you on my first retreat in 2015, and you seemed a very experienced releaser by then already. So when did you start finding kind of releasing partners or facilitating other people?
Fairly early on. The first retreat I ever did was one with David Elsey in Poland.
Sorry, in Poland?
Yeah, in Holland, the Netherlands.
Holland.
The Netherlands, yeah. It was a 3-day retreat, and I can't remember if it was the end of 2009 or the end of 2010, but around, I think 2010, I think the end of 2010. And he had talked about getting releasing partners. So when I got home, I had a friend who also did releasing, who you've also met, Kasia. And I said, right, we have to start doing this more often. We need to be doing, I can't remember if it was daily releasing or what we were going to do. So for a long time, we would just facilitate each other. And that was my main releasing partner for quite a while. And I can't remember how I then started adding in. I think there was someone at the retreat that I did a little bit with, and someone at another retreat that I did a little bit with, and things like that the following year. And it just gradually grew from that. And also I introduced it to a friend who got incredibly enthusiastic about it, and she introduced it to dozens of people. And she had me, for some reason, she was convinced that I should be the person to introduce all this stuff. So I went along with her to all these things that she was organising. And then I introduced it to a massive room of people. We had the book, not the book, the video, DVD, Letting Go. Was it just called Letting Go?
Yes.
Yeah. And she showed that, and then we answered questions afterwards. And she also had a little group of people that I can't even remember what they were, but I introduced it to them, and she just was very enthusiastic that I do all these introductions, and so I don't know, I just did.
I would assume you did it pretty well, since you're still.
Well, yeah, I'm still facilitating, obviously, and almost as soon as I learned it, I was teaching it to other people. I mean, my father, as I mentioned, was diagnosed with cancer about the time that I first started using it, or not long after. And we used it a few times. I supported him with it quite a few times, including just in the weeks before he died.
Well, that is
he was
precious.
He was very open in it, and I think it's probably some of my most precious times with him. Or just memories of with the method as well. It was just really powerful.
Yes, I had the same experience when my mom had cancer and was dying of that. So she had dementia, so I couldn't share it with her. But in a way, I felt she had kind of released a lot already by then. Yeah, but it's truly amazing.
Yeah,
that kind of challenges.
Oh, that's interesting that you say that, because I really sort of deepened my own practice when my father had a year in the hospital with a heart condition. So something about that experience with a parent dying, because that's what that was, that really brought me into a deeper relation with the method and also with the community. So that was 2019. But I met you, I believe, in 2018 perhaps, or even earlier, on these facilitation practice calls. When did you start holding those?
I can't actually remember. It's been quite a while.
Well, you did the facilitator training in 2016, I remember.
Yeah, and I didn't start doing it straight away, but I was certainly doing it by 2019. I might have started before that. I'm not honestly sure, because I know the main reason I started up one was because at the time there was none that really worked for me to go to. So I thought, well, I'll set up my own one at the time that I can go. And the first time I did one, nobody came. And I thought, phew. And then after that, people did start coming. And there was one winter that it was me and one other lady. And that was it all throughout the winter. But now, of course, there's lots of people come on the practice calls. Yeah. But I'm not sure how long ago it was. But yeah, we have known each other for quite some time now because of that.
Yeah, just briefly, the facilitation practice calls, I guess they've been going on. The person that started this was Sydney, she, Allred, and she, I guess, began organizing them as part of the facilitator training course, which happens once a year. And yeah, so it was an idea, a way of giving people the opportunity to practice that, because we meet, of course, and then divide into pairs to facilitate each other. And for me, that was just, first of all, a way of deepening my practice, because there I was engaging with people on a regular basis, but also it was a way for me to get to know people. And one of those people was you.
Yeah. It has been wonderful for getting to know people. It has been a really good part of doing the call. Yeah, you, and there's been a lot of people I've met through them. It's lovely.
I think that's what makes the method so special and unique, is also that we have these ways of connecting and practicing together, because there are lots of good modalities out there, but if it's totally up to you whether you use them or not and how, it's so easy to kind of forget it and become lazy and like, blah, I can't be bothered. Or if you always have to pay for a course to kind of practice it, but we are really getting to know each other and practicing it back and forth, so it stays alive and deepens all the time.
Well, not only that, but we get to see the progress that others are making as well. And that's so wonderful to see the growth, to see them developing, to see, you used to have that. We used to work together on that issue, but, you can hardly remember it anymore.
Yeah.
So you've seen these things drop away.
Yes, yeah. And that then makes it easier to find the courage or whatever to keep doing it yourself when you're going through a sticky patch, because we all have times when it feels like we're stepping backwards or something, even though we're not, but it can feel like we are. And I have come to recognize that if someone's asking me the questions and I'm just no, just feeling really resistant, that's actually really good, because what it means is something that's been quite sticky in me and quite big to release is actually coming up to be released, because it just does it to begin with a lot of resistance, and then eventually the resistance pops and I see things differently, and that's happened quite a lot of times.
Yes.
I don't think I get quite so stuck in the resistance now, but I don't know. I wouldn't like to say that just in case it happens again.
Yes.
Well, you in particular encourage people to share gains at the beginning of these facilitation practice calls. And if not gains, because I was releasing and this happened, or this was the result, or this, sometimes it's just what you're grateful for, which in fact is the same thing.
Yeah.
And it really, so I know that in my own life, it's really helped me to see these, these big milestones, and to remember that Oh, wow, yeah. I mean, life used to be a lot more of a struggle than it really is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of the reason why I feel like it's quite important. And there's another call that I used to run quite a lot in the mornings. They're not happening much now, but when they did, then there would be people that would come on and launch straight into everything that was wrong, or sometimes individual people I'd be doing that with. And it would be so much harder to then be able to get out of that, or out of that way of thinking, I suppose, than if you actually stop for a moment and think about what's working well. Because that most of life, everywhere you look, we're focused on the negative, and apparently there's evolutionary reasons for that. It's our brain thinks it's what's going to keep us safe, but it's, you know, we connect with other people through complaining a lot of the time. You see it
Oh, don't
everywhere.
we just? Yeah.
And you know, and it's in the political system, it's in everything. People don't tell you what they want a lot of the time, they tell you what they don't want. And I can remember a friend years ago saying to me, you know what you don't want, but you don't know what you want. I mean, this is decades ago. And it kind of struck me. And I know I can still have a tendency to go down that route of, oh, I don't want this and I don't want that. And it's sometimes easier to see what you don't want than what you do. And I think that focus of just noticing what you feel grateful for, it partly helps you to see what you want in life, what is there that matters to you, because that's what you feel grateful for. But it also just helps you to step out of the obsession that humanity has with everything that's wrong in life.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that we're not then going to welcome up what is apparently wrong and release on it, because that it's not either or.
Well, perhaps what it is that a lot of us begin with our first teacher is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what motivates us to find the Sedona Method and release, and to deepen our practice and to facilitate others and so forth. In the beginning, we're driven, we're sort of pushing away from suffering, we think, running away from. But after a while, I guess for me, it just sort of seemed that, well, wait a second, maybe I'm actually being pulled towards, or maybe I'm actually, focusing. My focus shifted much more towards what I wanted, and it felt more like I was being drawn in that direction rather than, the opposite.
Mm-hmm. I think I can still get caught up in what I think I don't want. But I think one of the things that Hale said, I've heard him say it a few times, but fairly recently, it just really hit home for me about how we are quite attached to our suffering quite often. We define ourselves by it, and we almost want to show everybody, look, this is my suffering, look how bad this is, look what I'm experiencing, so that we'll almost get approval for it. And I feel that is a really, I don't know, it's just when we can, no, that's not, I was going to say when we can hold that in mind, but it's not even that. It's just the recognition of that means that it's easier to see, oh yeah, I'm getting into this old habit again, and that's all it is. It's just an old habit. It's not me. So I don't know if that's making any sense or not, but
I think I see what you're saying, and to me, I think one of the most important things is a lot of what we're dealing with is below the surface for most of our lives. We don't really want to admit that, oh, we feel that way, and then finally when these things come up and you see them for what they are, you think that you have to do something because that's the natural approach the mind takes to, oh my God, look at this. But actually it's the seeing of it. Once it's visible, I'd say that's 90% of the solution, because now you see what you didn't see before. Yeah.
mm-hmm. And that's, I think, why welcoming is so effective, because that you then don't have to try and do something about it. You can see it, and that's it. And yes, just seeing the pattern is quite often enough for it to just release. And there's just so little work involved a lot of the time, so much less than what we think there is.
Well, actually, it's that sense of struggle and the work that creates the story of me against this heartless and cruel and difficult world. Yeah.
It's a very romantic image, that, isn't it? For some
No,
reason.
isn't it? But it's so central to a lot of what we do. I can only speak for myself, but yeah. If only I will achieve this or reach this or do that. But I have to overcome this or that or the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I will be happy when. How many times do we hear people saying that?
Oh, yeah. Happiness is always somewhere else. It's never right here.
Yeah.
These days, I think there's a lot of talk about working with your emotions and feelings and stuff. So people are kind of more used to the language, but with that language, I think comes the idea that you have to work with them. And it takes a lot of work, because if you have had something for years or decades, obviously it will take a long time to get rid of it or change it or anything. So I think that exactly how you said it, like there's much less work than when we imagine, that can be hard for some people to grasp. And I think I had to believe in the beginning that I have to kind of release something for a long period of time because it's been with me for so long time. And these days I kind of notice I have that pattern, like, oh, do I really? Could it be that's a belief?
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, I think actually that's one of the things that really drew me to the method as well, because that fairly early on I got a course. I can't remember what it was called. It might have been The Body and Beyond or something. But anyway, it was one that Hale had recorded over a weekend, I think, and in California somewhere, and someone asked him a question about how often should I be doing this? How often would you recommend doing it? And his answer was something like, well, I think you should do it 3.5 times a day, looking east and turning west, and all this stuff he made up. And then he just laughed and said, do it when you do it and don't do it when you don't do it. And that just really, it's because of this urge to drive and force and make yourself do things and get it right. And and I'd been reading some meditation. Well, I'd been doing some kind of meditation practice before where you had to do it every single day for a certain length of time. And if you didn't do it then you were failing and all this kind of thing. And it was just so much more relaxed and easy. And I just thought, yeah, I like this.
yeah. I definitely like it too. And I like how they used to say, because in the beginning, I used to have this, that I have to sit in a certain position, like preferably kind of back straight and, relaxed, close your eyes. And he said then at some point, like you probably said in many places, but that's when I first heard it, like there isn't a releasing position. Like you just do it in whatever way feels right. And I try to remember to tell it when I'm facilitating people here who know nothing about it, like there isn't a kind of the Sedona Method position you have to be in. There isn't the Sedona Method breathing, because lots of people kind of expect there to be like you do it this way, or like you said, facing east and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things that I really love about it, is that you just do it anywhere, anytime, so that it's there when you need it. So for a while I worked in a busy store. If a customer came in and it was awkward, I could welcome up my feelings. I could let them go. And it was the same with the thing I was talking about at the beginning of going to work at this place where I was doing the phone counselling, and I could do that while I was walking along. I could do that sitting at my desk if I was feeling nervous. I didn't have to go and hide in a room and meditate. I could do it right there and right then. And the same with the person that I was mentioning too. And again, so I suppose that was it. It was just seeing this is something that is there for you at any moment of the day, and in the difficult moments, and whenever you need it, it's there. When I was waiting to go and speak at my dad's funeral, I was welcoming the feelings that were coming up. And then I noticed, because I was terrified about doing that, but I knew I wanted to. And then I started noticing a voice in my head saying, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I thought, I'm not trying to make that happen. It's just coming. So that was, yeah, it's anywhere.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to see that and to explain that. Thank you. Yeah.
So you said you started facilitating quite early on. So what have been and you do it a lot, you do facilitation practice calls. So what's been kind of the biggest benefit for your own releasing? Have you noticed how that has deepened your relationship to the
Facilitating a
method?
lot. Oh yeah. Just having the moments of just spontaneous pure joy that just come bursting out, just because it happens so often. I feel like it probably happens more when I'm facilitating than any other time, but it happens several times a day. Just anyway, just when thinking just falls away, and there's just that whatever thing you can't really name. And there have been moments when I've been facilitating that it's just so clear that there is something happening here that's got nothing to do with what would, for want of a better word, I use the ego mind. It's way beyond what we can create for ourselves. Because I've had times when I've used words that I would never normally use, and the person I was facilitating would say, "Oh, that's one of my favourite words." And I think, oh, right, okay. And there was one person that I was facilitating that we were going through the wanted control, approval, and every time she would say, "Oh, there's an image popping up," and it was images of her childhood, I think. And then there was one, I think we got to wanting separation, and she said, "Oh, there's nothing there. I'm not seeing an image this time." And I knew exactly why, because I was getting the image. I could see this small child hiding, crying. And she said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I did when I was that age." They went and hid in I can't remember where, and I just found that so fascinating, because how did that happen? I have no idea, but it did. It's just, yeah.
There's a kind of a deep listening involved in facilitation. It's just what needs to be said sort of comes when it needs to be spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you feel that as well. That's happened to me, and it's just a very interesting. Well, it just seemed to me like we did a support call yesterday, you and I, and I just wanted to get back to that a little bit as well too, because that experience for me has always been so. I just thought that call happened perfectly. No?
Yeah, well, it's just like I say, I don't have this sense of, oh, I have to do this and I have to say that. When the first few support calls I ever did, there was certainly an element of that. And as I think Katya and I were talking about on WhatsApp, for the first, I don't know how long, but for the first quite a while that I hosted a support call, afterwards I would have waves of shame come up. The call would have gone fine, but I would just have all these waves of shame come up. And eventually I just kind of thought, well, it's just what happens. It's just there. And I don't need to try and work out why it's there. It's not because I've done anything wrong. It's just what's there. And I think it was possibly, I don't know. I could make up a story about why it happened. But we're not in charge, because the words just come out, and you don't know why they're going to do it, or what's coming. And that sounds kind of, I don't know what it sounds like, but it's certainly my experience that the thinking brain is just, it just comes from somewhere much deeper than that. Like you're saying, it's the deep listening. We're not listening with Someone was talking to me the other day about the physical heart and the emotional heart, and maybe that's the way of describing it. Maybe it's like more with the emotional brain.
The metaphor that I very often like to offer is walking, because the act of walking really is controlled falling. Yeah, so in order to walk, in order to take a step, you actually throw the weight of your body forward, and you're throwing your leg forward as well, and then your foot will land, and then it continues like that. And you could do the physics required to plot exactly where that foot needs to step. You could do that, provided the data, the equation, but the mind just knows. If you actually sat there trying to calculate each step, you'd never make it, across the living room, it wouldn't. But you don't need to do that. Each step happens automatically as it needs to happen. The foot knows where to land. So, no?
Mm-hmm. And that's not even the mind that's doing that. It's just I don't know, it's the system.
It's the difference. Exactly. It's the difference between the mind and its ability to calculate and make predictions and understand reality, which is a tremendously powerful tool. But on a different level, we actually interact with the world in a much more intuitive fashion. And the mind isn't that useful in these situations. We put so much value on it, but it's not actually useful in all situations.
I think in all the best conversations happen when you don't beforehand calculate and think and plan. Oh, I want to say this. I need to say this. I really have to say this. It's just unfolds and you respond what's being said. Sometimes you stay quiet. Sometimes you use words like Yvonne said. You have no idea why I said this. And then it turns out the other people need to hear it. It kind of guides the conversation somewhere you never planned it would go. But in a way, it's much on a deeper level when we are facilitating, because we kind of, you learn to, it's not even consciously stepping back, but kind of dropping out of it in a way. Yes. How do you find it, Yvonne?
Yeah, you mean when facilitating the consciously stepping back? I suppose I would liken it in some ways to writing. Actually, all three of us are writers, aren't we? And when your writing is going really well, it surprises you. And when it's not going well, it feels sticky and difficult. And but when I write something that is totally not what I planned, I have this in my head as to where this should go, and suddenly something else comes out. It's almost never worse than what I've planned. It's almost always better. And I think you're accessing the same sort of thing. I mean, writers talk about how their characters took over, or the writing wrote itself and things like that. And facilitating is just exactly the same as that. We're not in charge of it. It's not that it's in charge of us, but it's just that there's a flow that appears when we stop trying to get in the way of that flow, both with writing and with facilitating, because it's so easy to think that you have to control it. And I was reading something just recently that if you're struggling with writing, it's because instead of trying to communicate, you're trying to impress. And I thought, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Anytime that I get stuck, I'm thinking that I need to get this really good and people will like it. And, there's a whole lot of wanting approval going on in there. And I think they were sort of, the suggestion was to say, what is it I really want to say? And I thought, that's what I do anyway when I'm feeling stuck with writing. I do say, what is it I really want to say? And then it just comes out in a different way. I don't know if that particular bit applies to facilitating, but certainly that if you're trying to impress with your facilitating, then you're not really engaging with the other person. It's about you, not about them. And when you're facilitating someone, really, it has to be about them. It has to be about what they need, not what we need.
But also, it's the attachment to any outcome whatsoever in facilitation.
Absolutely. And that applies in writing too.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that on yesterday's call, we started talking about this before we started the podcast, but there was a particular fellow who was very trapped in thought, in head. And yeah, it was so interesting how he just shifted. The whole thing just shifted. It seemed, and I just really wanted to say that was also, it was evident to me that you were unattached to the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because really, if you facilitate someone and you think they have to get a release, then it's never going to happen because they'll feel that. I've been on the receiving end of that many times, and that really brings up my resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, if someone is facilitating me and I know that they think I should be releasing, it's never going to happen. I can't be the worst person on the planet to facilitate sometimes for that reason, I think. It's just, this resistance just comes. But maybe we all have that. I don't know.
Oh, I think it's universal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the beginning, when I started facilitating, I remember the stage when I hadn't done much freestyle. Kind of like I had done the ready-made scripts from the workbooks, from the retreats and courses. And I was so nervous in the beginning. And I thought that, oh, I've already used that question twice. I must find something else. Like I thought it was, like you said, I was not trying to impress, but kind of, I was trying to survive, but also show that I know more questions than one. And it's totally not about the questions. But then eventually kind of just doing it more, and then you kind of start relaxing that, okay, the questions will show up when they do.
Yeah. And that actually takes me right back full circle to what I was talking about at the beginning about that place that I went to, that I did the counselling, the phone counselling. Mm-hmm. I eventually left that job under a bit of a cloud because that when I went into that and I just sort of didn't try to get it right, I was really capable and I could do really, really, really well at it. And on the days that I went in and I worried about what the supervisors would say because they listened into your calls, and I worried that I was going to get it wrong, I made a hash of it time and time and time again. And I was so frustrated with how inconsistent I was. It really frustrated me that I was really inconsistent, that I couldn't. And I can see now, and I've been able to for quite a long time, that experience was actually incredibly helpful for me in my sort of future role as a facilitator, because I could see how trying to get it right was exactly what made you get it wrong. Not that you're really getting it wrong, but that will make it far, far harder. And I guess that's part of why I just very quickly sort of stopped trying to get an outcome, because I knew that trying to do that was just not going to be effective.
Exactly.
It was, as they say, a very humbling experience, that.
Oh, yeah. So you said that it's hard to remember how your life was before releasing, but is there something kind of something you would call your biggest gain or biggest shift in your life since you started releasing, that or releasing would have brought to you?
Well, I guess it would be what I mentioned to you a while ago, just feeling spontaneous joy several times a day.
Well, that is a good gain.
Yes, definitely. It's just, I can just, well, it used to be when I had this wonderful little cat, I would come downstairs first thing in the morning and see her, and it would happen then. But, you know, it can happen at any time. I just look at my daughters, just just so many times. Just, people will say things and suddenly I'll just think, oh, and it just, yeah, it just, and just seeing. And I think the other thing, and I don't know quite how to put this, but just seeing the wisdom in other people too. Just seeing how much wisdom there is in people that have never been near anything like the Sedona Method. Just recognizing that we don't have a monopoly on wisdom, those of us that are maybe a bit more skilled at facilitating or that have been doing some kind of spiritual work or whatever like that. It's in everybody, and it's obvious in everybody when you start noticing it. And I can forget that a lot too. You know, the pride will come in and go, oh, look, I've been doing this for so many years, therefore I must be blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly somebody says something and you think, they're not doing anything like this. And they already can see that you just needed a lot of facilitating or coaching or whatever to be able to see that. And I'm not saying that in a way to put myself down. It's just seeing that really, and that wisdom would have been in me too. I just didn't see it, I guess, is what I think I'm saying, that it's there in all of us. This is back to that thing of where we're all already whole and complete exactly as we are. We just, most of us, most of the time are not looking there. Does that make sense?
It's really a shift of focus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, sometimes I've said that happiness is really a shift of focus because, again, it's like, are you going to focus on the problems or focus on the things that bring you joy, make you feel alive?
Mm-hmm. One of my favourite questions, which is not strictly speaking a Sedona Method question, but I heard it on Hale's podcast, so I'm going to count it as, and I think I've maybe even adapted this a bit, but it's what's here when there's no thinking about problems.
Yeah. That is really good.
It just takes you right. Well,
yeah, and I think it's the way the triple welcoming is usually or often explained about the little dot on the huge vast white paper. It's so simple and it's so true because that's how we often behave. We really, really dive into that tiny little dot and this is the universe and all is black. No, it's not. It's just what I'm focusing on.
mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my friends explained it like this, that most of the time we're going around like this with like 3 lights. So we're really not seeing very clearly.
Yes. So one more day-to-day question. How do you practice the method now? You do the facilitation practice course, but what's your own practice? How do you prefer to do it these days?
I quite often, for years actually, have used a kind of way of journaling where I actually just release. I ask the questions in a journal. I write it down. So it's almost like I suppose talking to myself, but in writing. I do that on a daily, not every single day, but I do that quite often, especially if something kind of really is sticky. I have got a lot of audios that I've listened to a lot of times. The one I've probably listened to the most is the one on self-love and compassion, because it was the one I think I needed the most, and it came out at a really good time for me because I was doing a lot of beating myself up at the time. So I have listened to that one many, 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 many times. I don't listen to audios anything like as much as I used to do. I used to go to sleep listening to them. And then my iPod stopped working properly, and so I had to go cold turkey. But no, I just it's almost like it's just part of life. So it's not even something that I really do a lot of the time. It's just, it shifts how you look at life. You, instead of you just, when I notice a feeling coming up, like this morning, I was noticing irritation and just sort of think, oh yeah, that one, okay. And then I start noticing the judgments that I've had about it and how I shouldn't be like this. And I was doing some releasing with a partner a few days ago, and she was sort of saying, you know, it's fine to feel irritation or anger or whatever. And I intellectually have known that for a long time. And I've also had even before I knew the Sedona Method, I read a blog posting, which I used to read a lot of blogs, I guess, in which the guy talked about how when you felt a feeling, and he was talking specifically about anger, you could just notice where it was in your body and just let it, and it would just pass eventually. And it was really interesting to experience that. So I will do that sometimes, just let the feelings come and let them go. And then I will catch myself resisting, because I still do that, and wanting to control and just sometimes just welcoming that too. Because again, I feel welcoming for me seems to be more effective than anything else, or other than just letting it happen however it does.
But more and more you notice what's coming up in the moment and simply allow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was something happened earlier on, and I noticed, oh, I'm having a reaction to that. And and at one time I would have thought, right, I've got to go away and release now. But I think there's more of a trust that it will happen by itself without having to go and really dig into it.
Yeah, I caught myself this morning thinking, I was counting all the topics I should release on, and I started from the first one and then went to the second one. And I think somewhere around the fourth, I was like, I really have to go through these all one by one. Like, could this too be just the belief? Like, it doesn't matter. I really don't have to go topic by topic like I used to think, but it's the acceptance. For me, the welcoming term works sometimes, not always, but kind of the acceptance of just noticing this is what it is, this moment. When I get there, that seems to be the quickest way for me for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that bringing kindness to anything makes a huge difference. So sort of, if you are releasing because you think you should, it's back to that thing of when you're trying to fix things. If we're releasing because we think we need to fix ourselves, that's never going to work, because we're doing it with an agenda. So we're just back in that fix it mentality.
Well, it contains within it that desire to control the outcome.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I've done that plenty of times too. The whole list of, I need. In fact, last year there was someone that I facilitated, and where I used to work, they used to have to give feedback, and this person gave feedback of, instead of that I should, it was something to do with beliefs about money. Instead of letting go, I should be challenging beliefs about money instead of letting them go. I think that's what it was. And at first I sort of thought, I don't really know what they mean. And then I thought, oh yes, I have so many beliefs about money. I ought to be getting rid of my own beliefs about money. Then I'd be more effective at helping other people to release the beliefs about money. And I got caught up in thinking, oh yes, this is all something that's an issue for me, and I really need to be dealing with this, and then I'll be a better facilitator and blah, blah, blah. And then, I don't know, somehow something, I realized, oh yeah, maybe that's a belief. Maybe it's the belief that I have so many beliefs about money that I need to release, that's actually that's at the forefront here or whatever. And it just was helpful to see.
Well, what you're describing is the activity of the mind. The mind is always scanning the horizon for threats, right? It's going to protect, it's going to ensure our safety and survival. That's the idea. Except that it just becomes overactive, right? And it gets to the point where there's an old joke about middle management, right? What is the job of middle management? The job of middle management is to create problems that only middle management can solve. So the brain just gets involved in these endless to-do lists, and it becomes, well, that's what it does. That's how it ensures its own survival, and it's trying to ensure ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gets so tiring, doesn't it?
Yes, that's
it's so pointless.
Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. It is tiring, yeah.
Yeah, so actually here's a true confession again. During the Friday support calls, my favorite part is the silence. Because when you first run a support call, when it's a new thing, well, okay, well, I'm here to facilitate who wants help. And then the answer is silence. Fine. Because then it sort of fills and fills and fills until finally somebody eventually will speak up, or maybe it just, you know what, maybe we'll do a group release on whatever the topic is. It comes up anyway, what I'm saying. But the silence itself, it's kind of rewarding. It really is. There's a richness to it, I find. It's not just me being silent, but it's all of us on the call waiting to see what happens next, what comes up next. Yeah.
And sometimes it's just actually because that just being in that space actually is calming.
Mm-hmm. Again, even to have permission to be silent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh no, nobody's saying anything. We have to fill the silence. Do we? Do we?
There's also the effectiveness of the crew that surprises me, like every time, or the kind of the support you get from being on a support call. Just kind of like, I've often noticed that just very simple facilitating, well, not simple, but kind of like it never matters what the people are asking about, what the topic of the releasing is. It's always helping me as a listener too. Even if I've never thought about that topic before, or even if it wasn't an issue for me, there's something in the call that's helpful. And then because there are more people, it always seems more effective. And in these days, it's I think it's really beautiful that we can gather together with the intention of feeling calm and peaceful and loving. I think that's also one among the many best things in the method.
That's a pretty joyful intention, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Yvonne, do you have anything you'd still like to say to people who might be wanting to dive more deeply into the method, or anything else you'd like to share?
All that's coming up for me right now is just what we've been talking about just now, really just noticing the silence that we get so interested in the mind's chatterings that we forget to notice the silence. And the more we notice and just pay attention to the silence, I don't even know how to express it, but just the more life just is just joyful and just and that sounds kind of Pollyanna-ish, but it's not like that, because things can be happening and the silence doesn't necessarily mean that we're not talking, but it's just more noticing that there is a silence even when there's noise, that there's something else that's just there, that presence, that. And for me, that's what we're always trying to point people towards and point ourselves towards, because I certainly don't remember about that every minute of every day or even close. And it's not even about remembering, it's just.
Well, it's the silence upon which all words appear, and without silence, you wouldn't have the words.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It's, for me, it's not just about the words either. It's for, I don't know if I'm using the word silence or stillness in a, but it's like almost I can almost feel it like a physical thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's because people quite often use words like beingness and things like that. And for me, that gets me in my head and takes me away from this. Whereas this is a very, very difficult to describe thing, but it's very present, very much here.
It's that which is beyond words and also beyond the mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I was looking for something different, thinking that it was, I don't know what I thought it had to be, but it was all made up stuff. And just, yeah.
Yeah, anything but this. That's been the thought that I've had for quite a long time, and still often do most days. Then remembering that, well, no, that's just a thought.
And sometimes it seems like it can't be as that simple. It's back to what you were talking about earlier about the truth is simple. If it was complicated, everybody would understand it. Sometimes it just feels like it can't be this simple. And so we get caught in thinking that we need to add something on to that, and yet when you look at the people that really get life, they live very simple lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very, very simple and very profound, and it is kind of fun to think that most of us start this using the method because we want to fix something. We want our lives to look and feel better. Then we kind of end up here. We don't end up anywhere, but this is what seems to follow that for most of the people. And I think it's quite beautiful.
Yes, because we see that it's not the circumstances of our lives that are actually causing our suffering. It's our thoughts and feelings about it. I mean, I've heard it said, this is not really from a Sedona Method person, but it doesn't really matter, it's relevant, that it's not about changing our thinking either, because we can quite often get caught in that too and think, oh, I need to stop having thoughts, which is kind of how we get caught in all this thinking that we have to do all this releasing of all these topics. But it's when our relationship to our thinking changes that everything changes. So it's when our relationship to our feelings change that everything changes. It's when we start seeing it as okay.
Well, we see that the feelings and thoughts come and go.
Yes, yes.
And there is something upon which all thoughts appear, upon which all feelings are expressed. And it's noticing that and resting as that. And facilitation is a way of inviting others to come and join or to rest as that. And facilitation happens from that. And that's it. It's just simply going back again and again. There's different names, of course. Eckhart Tolle likes to refer to stillness and silence, whereas, others will talk about awareness. Hale will as well sometimes too. Or the Tao is that which cannot be described. Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about Eckhart Tolle as we were talking about this as well.
Yeah.
Because he has a book called Stillness Speaks. I've actually not read that one, but
Well, it's exactly. I haven't read it either, but Stillness Speaks is a wonderful title.
It is.
Kind of gets back to what we've been talking about on the podcast here too. Yeah. Isn't that what we're talking about when it comes to facilitating others?
Yes.
So speaking from the stillness.
Yeah. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. This has been a really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure we would find more topics to continue, but I think this might be a good point to pause this conversation. Thank you, Yvonne, for coming, sharing with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Yvonne.
It's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.